Hey, how's it going?
Morning, Stuart. How are you this morning?
Doing amazing.
Me too.
It's
I feel amazing.
it's, it's one of those mornings. I just feel good. You know,
I feel like if you look good, you feel good.
I think
And
so too.
I think we look good right now.
I think we look amazing.
I think what's awesome is that our podcast listeners are probably like, what is wrong with these guys? Like what's happening right now?
Well, it's 4 a.m. in the morning, and David is wearing an amazing like what wig was that for originally? Is that for a
It was
coffin?
for it was for Jacob to be Steve Irwin, but like Steve Irwin, his hair didn't look like this from what I recall.
No,
No,
looks more amazing on you.
it is pretty amazing though.
And I just felt like it was gonna be a mullet kind of day. 80s 80s rocker mullet.
I love yours. I love yours so much. So it's like so perfectly like kind of permed in the front.
Hmm.
Got the party coming down the back. Like if I
Yes.
could grow hair, I would say that when we get out, we would attempt to do something like this, but ain't happening for me.
Yeah. Not happening.
No.
Yeah. So for those that are listening to the podcast, just go take a quick glance at the YouTube version of this uh, because mullets are awesome and you should have one.
And I think like my dream, and I do this often, like without a wig, just for my kids, but I like will do that with my hair because it's like a dream. Like I just want to be able to push the hair behind my ear and like
Just flip it in the wind.
go like that to get it out of my
Yeah,
eyes.
but you know what? I'm actually kind of grateful that I don't have long hair because I see like my wife and my daughters dealing with like long hair all the time. It kind of seems like a pain in the butt.
What are we
Um,
talking about right now?
I don't know what what is this podcast about,
So
anyways.
I am just super excited about this podcast today because we have a very special guest on, Stuart the Rocker Grazier, one of my
Yeah,
favorite guests. Really excited about today.
yeah. This will probably be the most listened to podcast. I'm gonna try to be humble about it,
Yeah,
but I'm just gonna throw it out there that this will probably be the most downloaded. Just saying.
yeah. I mean, you are the most humble dude you know, and I think that's important. And I, for one, am just grateful to be surrounded by someone like you who's so humble and uh. So yeah, dude.
Uh,
I think, but I am excited about today's podcast. We don't have a real guest. I mean, you are a real guest,
yeah, seriously, what's up?
but not really. Your
Oh,
name is on the podcast. Um, I've been having a number of conversations recently, and I'm going through the process. So we thought today we would kind of talk about, for military members, just give a bit of a more of a practical conversation, one that we've been having lately. And I mean, I think I've had this same conversation 3 times this week, which is, kind of prompted me to be like, hey, this is something that I think would be really important just to put to our listeners. And you had a lot of ideas immediately when we started talking about it. So
yeah, man.
what are we
And
going to talk about?
I honestly don't think that this has to be directly pointed towards military members because honestly, I think this could be really to anybody who um, is not really like in a permanent location
Yeah.
from day one. It's like if they're going to be moving of any sort with their job, or this isn't think this isn't going to be like where they settle down, like in their location. I think that this could also be very beneficial to kind of think about. But as you and I have kind of grown as kind of leaders in our military communities and our jobs, and we've been open about our real estate background, our entrepreneurial background, our finance and money background. The more opportunities it brings for people to come to us and ask questions. And the biggest question, the most common question that you and I probably get is, hey, I'm moving to my next duty location. Should I buy? Or should I rent? Or, what should I look for in a house? And I think it's important. We're going to break kind of down what this really looks like. But I would say, I don't know, man, even before I was educated on it, we'll talk about it. I would say the majority of military members don't buy correctly. They choose to buy a house. So I don't know, we're going to talk about house buying mistakes.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, and we thought it was important to start with your why, right? And understand, excuse me, understand what your long-term goals are. And I think it's a great point. You don't have to be in the military. I think the military affords us an opportunity to know that we're going to be moving a lot, and it affords an opportunity to be in multiple markets potentially. If you're moving, all over the country and moving every 2-3 years, there are unique opportunities. And I will say what's kind of saved our bacon. I didn't have a strategy or a why necessarily when I bought my first house. I lost that one subsequently. Um, but since then, we have always bought like fixer uppers and well below what we could qualify for. Still nice houses, right? We're going back to one in Colorado here shortly. That's going to be our forever home. Plenty of house for us. We bought it before we ever had a kid, but it was a family house, or a house that could fit a family. But it was, we put a lot of money into it because it was a short sale and it was nasty, and so my wife still had that vision to buy well below what we could qualify for, and that I think will turn out pretty well for us when we go back to Colorado. But all that being said, when I start asking the questions, when someone asks us, hey, should I buy a house? Obviously, one, it depends, but two, I start asking, like, my first question is, okay, what's your long-term goal for this house? What do you want it to do for you? When do you want it to do these things for you? And oftentimes it's very surface level conversation because the individuals haven't thought that deeply about it. And that's not a hit. I think that's relatively normal. But what I will say is, and it's people always hear real estate's great. You should buy real estate. And so they just assume that that's just all real estate. I should buy a house everywhere I'm stationed and it's going to do well for me. Well, unfortunately, that's you have to dig a lot deeper into that before you purchase that home. So first, understand your long-term goals, establish them. What is your why for investing? And then, that's kind of like step one. And you have to understand and consider the different strategies when you want to buy these houses, and when you want them to perform and how you want them to perform. And ultimately, the only way to understand the strategies is through education. And education is a lot different than emotion. And you can't let the emotion dictate what your strategy is. You have to figure out what your strategy is and then apply. You can apply some emotion to that, but again, it should be a numbers game. And most of us, when we go into these situations, it's not a numbers game, unfortunately. And emotions sell houses, and we may get ourselves into a situation that, you can't call yourself an investor and buy one of these houses on emotions, right?
Right.
Just because you invest in a property and you potentially look at it long term to be an investment property doesn't make you an investor. You have to educate yourself. It's not good enough just to say, I want to buy some real estate and buy real estate, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I was recently a guest on a podcast, and one of the questions that was asked is, what is a piece of advice, a bad piece of advice? And I'm sure you got the same piece of advice when you were younger. Is they say, hey, buy a house at every duty station. and then buy it and keep it as a rental forever. Well, I don't think that's a very good piece of advice, because especially in the Navy, there are some locations that just don't make sense to buy. We can talk about a few examples of that in a little bit. But even if you decide to buy every location, it has to come back to a numbers game. It has to be a calculated decision based off of numbers and math and not emotions. So many times people decide to buy based on the best the best school zone, the best school area, the best district, the kind of the wealthy area of town, maxing out as much as you can get for a house, buying based off of what you really want for amenities and niceties in a house. And I think it's a huge mistake. We've both done it, right? And we learned the hard way. And I think there's a lot of people that you talk to that have made that same mistake, and then they don't know how to get out of it when they move, or they think what they are doing is a good strategy, but at the end it's not. So, understanding, while it's nice to have like the nicest house in the best neighborhood, it's all good, but understanding what exit plans you have before you even buy the house is
Yeah, and I think to
the
that,
smart
man,
way.
is huge. I think one additional step to that, I think it's fair, and you should do this. You should ask yourself, is living in a really nice house, quote unquote, really nice house, important to me? And is living in such and such neighborhood important to me and my family, with this school, like all the things you mentioned? And I think it's a fair question to ask, right? That's been something that has never been. Obviously, we want to live in a nice, a nice school area. We don't want to live in somewhere that, you don't want to take this to the extreme the other way, but you have to go in there with the mindset of knowing, okay, it's a PCS. Do I want to live in this area? Is there a chance I will live in this area for the rest of my life once I retire? Because you're going to retire at some point or get out. And if the answer is no, then that should really drive a decision on what kind of house you're going to get. And I say that because a lot of people, they don't acknowledge it until you start digging, but it is very important for them to have a nice house that people come to and they're like, "Oh, this is a beautiful house." And that is important to so many people. And it's okay to acknowledge that. And if you don't acknowledge it, one, you're not self-aware enough, and that's a problem in and of itself. And two, you're setting yourself up to max, people that kind of have that mindset are maximizing their loans to get the nicest house they can get, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that you understand that. And if that is you, that's fine. Maybe you should rent, because you're going to get yourself in a situation that you're going to tell yourself, hey, I'm making an investment. And then when you go to leave, or when you run the numbers, when they're like, run real numbers, like, okay, this house cost me this much a month. I can only make this much. There's a cap on rent. So I can only make this much a month. I'm going to be paying 10% on top of that. Whatever the rent is, I'm paying 10% out of pocket to my property manager. And there's some CapEx items I need to do. And when you run those real numbers, you're like, wow, I'm in the negative really quickly. And it's not a good strategy. Investors don't invest to lose money every month.
What?
Right.
You don't want to lose money as an investor?
Yeah. And I have, and again, there's no
Yeah, me too.
judgment here, right? There's no
Right.
judgment, but you should be able to have a conversation with your husband, your wife, whatever, and say, hey, it's really important to me that this house has the granite countertops, and the premium floors, and the this and that and the other, beautiful kitchen, super open concept, blah blah blah. Like, you should acknowledge that, and recognize that it's a PCS and a duty station. It's probably temporary, and so that starts the investor mindset.
Yeah. So we came up with we're kind of calling this house buying mistakes. And so we came up with three mistakes. And so this first one that we're talking about is kind of the main one. This is the one that we have most of our conversation about is, what type of house that you're buying in your location. And so what we see very often is someone is maxing out your buying power on a home that you don't intend on staying in, and you still think it's an investment because it's real estate. You're buying real estate, so it's an investment. And so that alone, I think, is a huge mistake. So you're buying on emotion, and you're not buying on actually running numbers and doing math. What do you think?
Yeah. Again, we kind of touched on that, and a lot of that, it's a mindset, right? You understanding why, um, and again, a lot of there's a lot of reasons to analyze why that, whether it's a number that's important, or a value of a house, or perception that the value is going to always go up, or whatever, and it drives people to make those decisions. And you're at unless you're very, very conscious, and you have that strong why, and you're looking at numbers and understanding when you're analyzing the market rents versus your mortgage versus your BAH, or if you're not military, same thing, just not BAH, but your living expenses and your budget. If you're analyzing that, then you're not at as big of a disadvantage when people are always trying to talk you into doing what, it's the American way, right? Your realtor is going to be talking you into the nicest property. Your lender is going to be encouraging you, like, hey, I know you make whatever, but with the rates where they are today, and the market as hot as it is, I can get you in a house. You're pre-approved for $650,000. Well, so then you feel like you have to get up into that $650,000 range, and you feel good if you buy a house for $595.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe if your income and your means support, and that's not really a substantial, whatever that number is for you, that kind of is tapping you out. If you're, making really good money, maybe that's $1 million house, whatever, but they're going to pre-approve you at the top end of what you're qualified for.
Yeah.
And so I typically, when I'm buying a house or looking at a house in due stations where I'm not going to stay, I'm typically taking $200,000 to $300,000 off that from the get, because I've already looked at the numbers. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to buy this $650,000 house. I'm looking in the 300 range, right? And a lot of times the realtors and the lenders are like, what are you doing? And in my mind, I'm like, dude, I feel no pressure from them, because I know exactly what I'm attempting to do in the grander scale of real estate investing.
Yeah. And with that comes, so one of the mistakes that I made along this same line is, so I lived in San Diego. My first duty station was in San Diego. I moved there in 2004 is when I moved there. Hot real estate market. Everything was going up. San Diego was just booming. It was like going like 10, 15%, increase a year. And so, what was my strategy when I bought? We bought a super expensive house. A friend of ours from college, we were in a squadron together, decided to kind of partner up, and we went and bought a huge house, expensive house in San Diego. I'm not ashamed of it now. Like it was an $812,000 house in Pacific Beach in San Diego. We bought it in 2005. So we split it. So it was like 400 and something thousand per person. We were 25 years old, young lieutenants, and no way we should have qualified for that house. But they were just throwing out loans, maximizing out.
Early 2000s, man.
Yeah. And what was our strategy? Our strategy was, hey, it's going to increase, another 10, 20%. We're going to sell it, in 3-4 years and make $1 million. That was our strategy. That was it. And we ended up deciding to bring in renters, kind of rent out the other rooms and do like, the quote unquote house hacking thing. And that helped us tremendously on making our payments. And that's what pretty much got us by. But it was just a dumb strategy. And we bought it solely off of emotion because we thought it was a great location. I mean, it was a great location. It was in a beach community. It's a great house across from a park. Like, we loved it, but it wasn't a smart decision. It wasn't a smart financial decision.
Yeah, that's tough. And when I bought my first house, I tell this often, but I bought in Hawaii. I won't recap the whole thing again, but long story short, I was so ignorant to the things that were available. I didn't use the VA loan, had no idea what the VA loan was, and I just wanted to be a real estate investor because that was a smart thing to do. And my wife, girlfriend at the time, she was truly a real estate investor. She had bought a house in Pensacola and completely rehabbed it with her roommate, and she did well on that. Years later, used the like a buyout basically for that house to fund a down payment on a condo, which we had in Colorado, which we once we moved back to Colorado, lived there temporarily. We sold that and bought 3 houses in Milwaukee from the proceeds for that. So she's the true investor. She was a smart one. She made some really smart decisions and always had the mindset of living below her means, but not as a scarcity mindset, as a way to get into a place to build equity, sell it, and use that. And as I started getting smart on the strategies and 1031 exchanges and all these things that she didn't care about, wasn't tracking, I was like, we can leverage these great decisions you made into things I've now researched extensively and turn them into like actual profit centers. But her decisions were that base. And I'll tell you now, the house in Colorado that we're moving back to, I was like, this is gross and I do not want to live here. Disgusting. Like, it was so nasty, dude. In there, right? We put a lot of work in it. That house is beautiful.
Yeah,
it's amazing awesome. That the views out the back there over the state park or the front range, they'll never build there. It sits up higher, so you're looking over all the other houses and you have this amazing view for miles. And it's 5-bedroom house that we put a bunch of equity, or I'm sorry, we put a bunch of sweat equity into, and now now it
does have a lot of equity in it.
It does. It's crazy. It's a huge blessing. But that was my wife. Like, no, I have a vision. Like, we literally, I don't know if I told you this, but when we walked through that house to look at it, we literally like had to like tunnel our way through all this just garbage that they had stacked in the house. Just to get to the backyard, and I was like trying to rush out of the backyard because the house stunk. It smelled so bad. And I like got out into the backyard on that deck and was looking at the views. And even in that, I was just like, I told a realtor, I'm like, why are we here? And it was a short sale, like great deal, and well below what we qualified for because she had a job at the time too. And I was like, I don't think so.
So what you're saying is, I really should be talking to Erica about being my business partner and not so much you.
I told you that for a long time, dude. Like, okay. Yeah.
I'll give Erica a shout a little bit later.
Yeah. No. But long story short, she had a very firm sense of the why and was looking at the future. And I was like, the place I had bought, I still own the place in Hawaii. When we moved to Colorado and we're married, and I was losing $1,000 a month, and it was rented. And that is such an easy equation. Before I bought, I could have been like, okay, my mortgage is this, the market rent is this, like what's my delta? But I wasn't an investor.
Yeah.
I bought a nice condo that was awesome, and it cost me $400K, $400 a square foot. And it just wasn't, it was not a sound investment because I did not look at it from that perspective. So you and I both, before we ever started a business and really started doing real estate together, we both lost a house.
Yeah. And one thing you just briefly brought up that is actually a point that we wanted to make before we move on to the next kind of major house buying mistake is, buying a house. And if you do a little bit of math and you kind of look at, well, my mortgage is this and I can rent it for this and it covers it, then it's a good investment. It's also a mistake because there's so many times that people will be like, all right, well, I can rent it for $2,000 and my mortgage is $1,908. I'm good to go. And it's such a false, such false advertising. And there's so many other expenses that you have to consider as a part of your monthly payment that go into making a decision on a sound investment. And so it's just another mistake there that you got to think about.
Yeah, and I think related to that, one thing that what I've been emphasizing, and again, this is the same calculus I'm going through right now for this house that we currently live in, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you also have to think of the worst case scenario, right? So in the scenario you gave is not an unlikely scenario.
Oh.
Like, it is very, very realistic. I had the same thought process, but again, when you start thinking about, okay, just property management alone, you're already in $100 to $200 hole right off the top, right? And you don't want to self-manage. If you're in San Diego or overseas and you bought a house in Maryland, is that something you want to self-manage? How are you going to do that? Like, it's going to be unless you have some friends or connections, but even that. So say you knock the property management off, you're still, the one thing that's really, I think people really need to focus on, when you turn your house, when it's a rent, a turnover, right? It's not a day like somebody's out one day and somebody's in the next day. A lot of times they're going to leave, maybe they leave in the middle of the month. Maybe they leave at some point. Maybe they leave at the first of the month and you get someone who's coming in on the first of the next month. So that's 1 month of lost rent. Well, when you have a house that's not cash flowing or it's barely cash flowing, your mortgage payment is still $1,900. So say you're cash flowing $200, say. So we'll just say it's $2,000 is your mortgage payment. You're cash flowing $200 a month, which my mortgage here is under $2,000. And I, based on the market here, I could probably rent it all day long for $2,800. You would think, you're like, oh, that's $800. That's pretty good. No, right off the top, $2,800 minus $280. So almost $300 in property management. So now I'm down to $2,500. So now my income is maybe $5,000. And then I've got the other expenses, right? Something happens in the house, whatever it is. So maybe I'm down to, we'll say conservatively, I'm down to about $300 a month cash flow. And my mortgage is $2,000. 1 month of lost rent in that house, 1 month, is going to take me almost 10 months to make up, just to break even. And that's every single cycle, right? And if something happens and maybe it goes a little longer than a month, or maybe there's some repairs, I'm potentially putting myself years just to catch up and break even. That's not investing. And again, I'm not saying that, this sounds really negative for buying. I have bought at all duty stations, but you have to have multiple exit plans and you have to think about why you're doing it, because at the end of the day, it's taking a long time to make up. In Milwaukee, the house is there. My mortgage is like $500. So 1 month without rent, right? And each of them is cash flowing about $500. So that's a 1-for-1.
Right.
I can make that up. One of my places went unrented for like 8 months because of some issues I had, but I made it up relatively quickly. So, I made it up. I made up 8 months of no rent in 8 months of rent. And can you imagine 8 months of no rent at a $2,000 mortgage payment?
That would hurt.
It hurt real bad. And so those are the numbers that you have to be thinking about. And I think it's important to always consider something that, and it's not even worst case scenario, man. 1 month of a place not being rented is not even that extreme.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the next mistake that we think is a mistake. Now, not everybody may think that this is a mistake. We've also had lots of conversations about this, and this isn't just a military issue. I think this is, nationwide. People have this type of mindset, and I would say a lot of it comes from kind of the Dave Ramsey mindset. I like Dave Ramsey. We've talked about him before. He got me kind of started down the path of financial freedom. But there's a point where I think he's wrong. And that's where this starts is a lot of people want to pay off their house early, make extra payments towards their loan on their personal residence so they can become debt free, mortgage free on their personal residence. And David and I think that's a huge mistake. I know, David, you were having a conversation with someone just recently about this. You want to kind of dig into that?
Yeah. So I think there is bad debt and there's good debt. And I think it's important to distinguish between the two. And I also think it's okay if your long-term play is to pay off your mortgages, to not have debt. That's something that we're doing within a rental portfolio that we're creating. The goal in the long-term, effort is to pay off these houses to have, but again, we're talking about like, dozens of houses that we want to put in a portfolio and paying them off over like a 10-year period.
Yeah.
So it's not, and there's a strategy to it. And, when you're talking about paying off your primary residence, my view on it is that why is it to feel good that you don't have a debt? And if that's the reason, then there's something to be said for that. But I always ask the following why again is, does that why and that reason overcome the opportunity loss that you're having by not taking that money and investing it somewhere? Because right now, we're talking about under 3% on conventional loans on primary residences. Like that is crazy cheap money. Okay. So when you're putting money into that payment to pay off your primary residence, are you doing it? And the conversations I've been having are people that are paying extra money to a residence that they intend to turn into they're leaving it. They intend to turn it into an investment property. And I'm like, but why are you doing that? Like, what's all that money? Do you not think that you could take that money, save it because it's substantial, and make an investment that will beat 3%? I mean, 3% is inflation.
Yeah.
So if you don't think you can get better than 3%, two things. One, lend us your money and we'll give you 10%.
Right.
Or like, there are so many things, and these are very smart, capable people. They haven't been exposed to the other side of that coin. They've only been exposed to, my house is my greatest asset and I should pay it off because the equity in that house. The conversation I had the other day is, I said, okay, two things. One, your house is not your greatest asset. It's your greatest liability because it's making you no money.
Yep.
And two, you are not investing right now because you're not looking at those numbers. You're making an emotional decision, and you're a smart dude. You can absolutely take your money, put it somewhere, anywhere, and beat 3%.
Yeah. So there are two like major financial theories that people are not taught in school that you just kind of covered. One is asset versus liability. What is the definition of an asset and what is the definition of a liability? And for a lot of our listeners, they already know that because they're real estate investors. But what I would offer and ask those that do know it is to teach others truly what that means. And an asset is actually something that's making you money like on a regular basis, like producing cash flow, producing income. Your personal residence that you live in, it's not producing any income. It's not producing cash flow. It's a liability.
Unless you're renting out rooms, right? Unless you're doing
like house hacking or something like that.
Very specific strategies.
Right. But it honestly is a liability because you have expenses every single month, and it's costing you money to live in that house. And a lot of people think that because it might grow over time and there's maybe some equity in it, that's an asset, but it truly isn't an asset while you're living in it. So, and then the other one is leverage, and using leverage and the opportunity cost that comes with it. Why would you use your own personal money to pay off a 3% loan when you can use that same personal money and make much higher of a return than 3%? Even if you put it in like an index fund in the stock market, you're probably going to make more money than 3%. And so just understanding how to really use leverage and use your own money and the opportunity cost that comes with that.
Yeah, those are huge points. And I want to clarify one thing. So if you look up, and I've had this argument a number of times, and so our definition of asset is a contested definition that's very Robert Kiyosaki-esque from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and other things that he's written. So you can get into a semantical argument about the definition of assets. We acknowledge that, right? We acknowledge that the true definition of asset, as per a financial course or whatever, is that you could nest your primary residence under that definition. We acknowledge that. But as investors, we're asking you to acknowledge that there are a number of very smart and rich people at this point that have a different mindset on what is a liability and an asset, and it enables them to make decisions that will make money, that will put money in their pocket that they can reinvest in other things, whether it's philanthropic, or philanthropic, but or time freedom, or invest in others, or if they want to buy a car, they buy a car, whatever it is, right? And so I think it's important to acknowledge, yes, we recognize that by definition an asset is such and such, but it doesn't really, at the end of the day, you want to be putting your money into things that are putting money back in you want your money working for you. A second point, and I think it's highly important because we're not taught this. When you're taught that your house is your greatest asset, you're making an assumption that equity will always go up. And whether it's forced equity, even if a renter is paying your mortgage, or if it's you forcing the equity by paying, we know in market cycles, they're typically, it's right now, we're due for a correction. It's over 10 years. They're about 8 to 10 year cycles. And so you better hope that and hope is not a good COA, but you better hope that when you're buying, that you're potentially at the bottom of that and it's climbing. And when you get out, you're at the top, right? Well, nobody can time that.
Right.
All the experts have been saying that this crazy stuff that's happening right now in real estate, yep, it can't last. It can't last. Well, they've been saying that for, the last 3-4 years. And I'm not saying it's going to last or not last. I'm just simply saying nobody knows. And if they tell you they know, I'll show you another person who also knows, who has the opposite prediction, right? Because nobody knows. So all you can do, if you're playing with leverage, if you're playing with equity and that's your game plan, I'd be very cautious. I'm also, we flip houses. Like that's what we do effectively. Yeah. So I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm just telling you that every house that Stu and I flip, plan B, which is equally prosperous, we'll just keep it and rent it. So you have multiple exit strategies, right? So if you're just playing the equity game and you have no plan B, then that's going to be, that could potentially be problematic tomorrow. Equity is pretend. It's pretend money. It's a number on a piece of paper that can double tomorrow. It can double tomorrow, or it can absolutely halve tomorrow. And then what? Is it still your greatest asset? You're counting on that money. If you're counting on that money, it's just a dangerous game, but that's just an education piece.
Yeah. We'll see on this last mistake. It's kind of a quick one, and then we'll kind of get into some ideas on what we've been kind of negative on what you shouldn't do with buying. We'll talk about some stuff that potentially could do to switch that around. So
Yeah.
last mistake that we see a lot and that we actually did ourselves was there is for the military and for veterans, there is an opportunity that's huge. It's called the VA loan, and in the civilian world, I would say the FHA loan is probably the closest opportunity to that. But the mistake that we made was putting a lot of money into a house out of our personal capital and doing a big down payment on a house, a 20% down payment on a house to reduce your debt and to reduce your payments. And it kind of goes right back to that idea of leverage and opportunity cost, and what's an asset, what's not. And so, a lot of times we see people think that the smart financial decision is to do a big, 20%, 25% down payment on a house and pour all their money, all their savings into that personal residence because they think it's an investment.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to opportunity cost, right? Is that, can you make more money with that chunk of money you're going to potentially put into a house and buy your equity? Could you do something better with it? And I always think the answer is absolutely you could, 100%. If you have to potentially do it to get into a house and the numbers make sense, it's going to be a great deal and it's what you got to do short term, then, fine, but you have a plan. You think through that plan, you have some strategies and you figure out how you're quickly going to make that money work for you. And whether it's a refinance or something like that, to pull that money back out to use it for other things, while you're paying 3% or under on a property. Those are, like, I've taken hard money on investments. I paid 12% for a short term, paid points, paid a lot of money out of pocket, but it was to get a long-term asset that I quickly refinanced out of that hard money and into a 3% loan. And so there are lots of ways to do it. But you just have to, you have to at least consider it and educate yourself on the possibilities, run the numbers and see if it'll work out. Because at the end of the day, it's all about opportunity cost. And I go back to that book, Garrett Gunderson's Killing Sacred Cows. I would encourage everybody to read that one because it's a great book about the misperceptions of money and where we put our money and how we make it work or don't make it work. And the opportunity cost is a big part of that book. And it's really hard to measure, right? But we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot quite a bit with when it comes to opportunity cost.
So what should we do? What should we do instead?
Yeah,
What's
this
some
is
of
the
the
good
stuff
part.
that how should we buy houses?
Yeah, so while we're kind of bash on equity a little bit, I want to be very clear. I think that I believe that equity, making purchases and playing the equity game is akin to gambling. I do. I think if you have no exit plan other than, hey, my house is going to appreciate, then you're starting off from a false premise and you're starting off on some dangerous ground. However, as I said before, I bought houses at a number of duty stations, and I think you can make a very educated and wise purchase decision, assuming multiple exit plans, and have a value add play. And that path can be very intentional. And I think it's a great way to do it. And typically what that means is that you're buying a house well below your means. And that when you go into the house, you have a vision and you're looking at the house for ways to increase equity via like sweat equity, or you're looking at it as a place that, you're going to rent the basement out in Annapolis as an Airbnb during the summer because people come in for, all the downtown festivities and the Naval Academy commissioning week, right? Like you have very specific plans that you're going to use that house for. And so, for example, my house here in Maryland, we're in a super blessed position because we bought a house, as a 05 in the Navy. I bought a house for $320K. and we did a lot of work in it, right? Did a lot of work, blew out the kitchen and took walls down and did things. But we went into the house knowing, okay, this wall, excuse me, this wall is going to come down. This ceiling is going to come out. We're going to bump this up. We're going to take the bathroom in the master bedroom. We're going to move the closet out, create a bigger closet, smaller master bedroom, but it's now going to have a full bath. Like all these things were in the initial walkthrough of the house. And we did all those things. And so we had a realtor come yesterday and she's like, I love this kitchen. This kitchen's going to sell the house. And I was like, awesome. That's great. And I don't know the numbers or when we're even going to move, but I will tell you that the numbers, a lot of this is market driven as well, but the numbers are very favorable.
Yeah.
And so it's going to open up other opportunities.
Essentially, if you're going to call it a strategy, it's a live and flip, So if you go into it, buying a house below your means, buying the ugliest house in a nice neighborhood, with the plan of going in, living in it, and doing a lot of fixing up, either doing it yourself or paying someone to do it for you. That's a great strategy. It's a great strategy, and a lot of people make a lot of money by doing it. Here's the other thing, from a tax perspective, is you've now lived in it for 2 years, and so any money that you make on it is all tax free because
that's right.
It's been your primary residence for 2 of the last 10 years, right? So
that's right.
Great strategy, live and flip. If you can go buy a house that needs a lot of work, you can buy it way below what it's worth, then that's it. That's it could become a real asset for you, when you decide to sell. The other one that, we talk about that, my wife and I did when we did a duty station in Fort Worth, Texas. It really is just, and you talked about it too, it's just buying a house way below your means. Again, we could have afforded a huge, a lot bigger of a house. And we decided just to buy, a regular house in a decent neighborhood. And we bought a $115,000 house in Fort Worth, Texas, which was probably on the lower end of what we could buy. But we went into it knowing that it was going to be a rental property. And, we did a few things to it. We didn't blow out walls or anything like that. We put in some new floors and painted it and stuff like that. But the strategy was going into it, ran the numbers ahead of time to make sure that it would run as a great rental property afterwards. And we used all of those expenses, the vacancy, the CapEx, the maintenance, property management. We ran all those numbers ahead of time, and it could rent for probably $2,000 a month.
That's crazy. So your primary residence, you were able to effectively hit the 2% rule on a primary residence.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So, that's crazy.
What we ended up doing, a little bit different of a strategy than what we actually went into it with, because our next duty station, we ended up moving overseas to Italy. And we kind of decided that we didn't want to be that long of distance landlords, like across the pond. So we ended up selling the house with seller financing terms. We did an auto finance, and we had a mortgage on it. But what we did was a wraparound mortgage, and we bought it for $115,000. I think we sold it for $180,000 with a 9% loan on it. And so we created equity between our purchase and the sale of that, and we created a difference between the loans. I think we had like a 4% loan at the time, and then we had a 9% loan paying us. So we were making $600 a month between the two. And
that's some varsity level stuff, though, right? Like you went into this situation, but you knew from the get it turned out probably better than you thought it was going to turn out, and you got creative with how you did that at the end. But the key is that you went into a house well below what you could have afforded. And it was, I'm sure it was a nice house. You guys enjoyed living there. It was fine.
Great.
It was temporary, right?
Yeah.
Like you knew it was temporary. So, I mean, who cares? And you were happy there. And then you had so many options, which is awesome. Like that is, that's pretty cool, man. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty cool that you also threw a bunch of different strategies at it because you had options to to be able to do that.
Yep, for sure, man. Yeah, sometimes I'm kicking myself that we should have just kept it because Dallas Fort Worth was blown up in the last like 10 years. It's like doubled in value, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right, what's the next strategy we should do? We could look at.
Yeah. So there's again, then these all kind of boil down to, you know, a lot of these terms are, since bigger pockets has gotten so big, a lot of these terms like house hack, you know, a house hack has gotten really popular. People have been doing them for years, but I think, you know, the principles are the same. And so house hacking. So what does house hacking mean, Stu?
Yes, I mean it could be a lot of different things, but I mean the main example is um, your intention is to buy a house and then either rent out other rooms or rent out another unit if you're buying, you know, a 2 to 4 unit, and essentially having your renters pay you, and that will either cover the mortgage entirely or potentially make more money than what your mortgage payment is. And so you essentially are living for free in your primary residence that you purchased and own. And there's
What a
tons of
great
different things.
strategy, right? What a
Yeah.
great strategy, especially for our younger listeners.
Oh man, I kick myself every single day
Dude.
that I didn't do that in Pensacola in flight school. Like for anyone that's listening, that's, you know, just starting their career and going to, you know, their first duty station, like buy a house and house hack it. Like especially if it's in like Florida or Pensacola or somewhere that's affordable, that worst case scenarios, you could just turn it into a regular rental property and still make money. Like house hack, like buy a fourplex and rent out all the other units. Like it's such an amazing strategy.
And usually when you go to your first duty station or first job, if you're, you know, civilian, a lot of times your buddies that you're there with, they're going to be like you don't have established families yet. You don't necessarily have a wife or a husband and kids that you need your own place. You're potentially a young single, and there's a lot of people that you're hanging out with that are just like you. They don't have your same mindset. And so they'll rent a room from you.
Yeah.
And that is such an awesome, I kick myself all the time that I didn't do that, you know, 2-3 times over. Cause I think I'd been to my third duty station by the time I got married. And yeah, man, what a smart play.
Yeah. Yeah. We're even considering house hacking at our house now in Colorado. I mean, you know, Denver's an expensive market, but we ended up buying a house that has a full walkout basement. So there's a separate entrance, there's a bedroom, there's a bathroom, there's actually a little like sink area. And so, you know, we haven't done it yet because of COVID, and got to get my wife, you know, amped for this strategy. But like, you know, we could throw the basement up on Airbnb and rent out our basement. There's completely locked. Like we can lock a door, separate entrance, and we can Airbnb our basement. I could probably cover quite a bit of our expenses on our house. So that's a great strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to say good luck with that.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
But at least it's a mindset, right? It's a mindset.
Yeah.
And where all this stuff kind of boils back to is it's a mindset. And there are multiple strategies. We recognize we are not the end all be all of strategies. These are just some of the things that we think through, some of the things that the ways that we consider our purchases. And they you know, have at the end of the day, there's an opportunity for them to work out really well because, you know, you make all your money on the purchase of a house, whether that's flipping, whether that's the house you live in, whatever it is. If you intend to make money on it, you're making that money on the purchase. And that comes with understanding strategies, having education, but applying those strategies when you're going into the purchase. And it's a lot harder to talk somebody into potentially spending more money if you already have that strategy, that sound strategy in mind.
Yeah.
And I think one last thing too that's really important. And I had a really cool conversation with my realtor yesterday. It was immediately apparent that she is an investor and an entrepreneur because she started asking these like really interesting questions. And we started talking about Storehouse and it ended up being like an hour and a half conversation. It was great. But her and her husband, he's a retired Marine. She does real estate. They have a construction type company. They have their own property management. Like they do all this stuff. And one of the questions she asked me, I thought it was so insightful. And she said, if you have this experience in real estate, like, why am I here? And I said, well, that's easy, Sarah, because I value what you bring to the table and I don't want to do it. I want you to sell this house. And there's a value proposition that I'm willing to pay for. And I want to create a win-win situation. And you win. You sell the house, you win. You get a commission and whatever. I get paid and I get this house off my books, and it opens up a ton of other opportunities because it gets the VA loan paid off. It's a number of different opportunities. And so there's a value proposition, and I'm not trying to scrimp on pennies when I could potentially make dollars. Yeah. Right. And so, but I'll tell you, and I think she was a bit taken aback. I mean, the answer was very quick because I know exactly what I need, what I want her to do. She knows exactly what she needs to do, you know, what she wants to do because she wants to make money as well. But those types of, you can have those value conversations when you have a very firm understanding of what it is you want. Could I sell sell by owner? Yes. What a pain in the butt, dude. Like, I have no desire to be bringing people in, showing them. Like, I want to film podcasts and be looking at deals and analyzing stuff in Wisconsin. I don't want to be a realtor for a house that I'm not going to sell as well as she is because she sold a bunch of houses. But again, that comes with understanding exactly where I want my time to go. And it's not based on, okay, I could save, I mean, well, I could say, yeah, I could save a couple, you know, a few $1,000, maybe $10,000, but is it worth it? Absolutely. And she's going to do a better job.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I love it. It's a really good point. And the last thing that we wanted to hit on, and this is also a strategy. We did it here in Colorado, is it's just rent. Like, just rent. It's not bad. It's not a bad decision to rent, especially if it's going to be very short term location that you're going to be in, or it's a really expensive location that you're going to be in, or you just don't know where you want to really live yet. And, for our family, we moved to Colorado from living overseas. We didn't really know where we wanted to be. The base and work was at a certain location. We were like, you know what, let's just rent for a little while close to work. I rode my bike to work every single day. It was awesome. And our rent was still quite a bit below what my BAH was. So we were saving money there. And, I personally think that sometimes it's a smart decision to just rent a property and not buy at every duty location. So,
yeah, people rent. I think the view on rent is more of it's a lie that we're told, and the American dream is to own a house and all this, that, and the other. And I think there's, when we went to Newport, is that a sexy place to consider buying? Absolutely. Like, Newport's cool. We were living by the water. We could potentially have gotten into a house, but we were there for a year, and we went there knowing, I was like, no, zero desire to buy a house. I don't want to be in this market. Could we make money? Yeah, probably. Could we buy well? Chances are, maybe we could have. But we went there, and we rented a great house, walked down to the beach. It was like a little bit under BH as well. Family loved it. Huge yard. It was great. It was great. And it was a season. It was a short time. We did it. It was great. We left. I have zero regrets. Zero regrets. So yeah, the way you think about renting should be, you look at the big picture, and you know, we saved a bunch of money and enabled us to come here and buy a house and whatever, right? So great point. And one last point I want to make about equity, sorry. Always recognize that even when you own your house, this is a conversation I had the other day with somebody, even when you own your house, the only time it's paying you is when you sell it. And if that's not something you want to do because it's your forever home, you're basically borrowing against it with you might have a nice HELOC. That's my money. I own the house.
Yeah.
And yet the bank, because they're so awesome and they're smart, I can't fault them. If I cash out refi, then cool, I have a bunch of cash in my hand that's tax-free, but now I have a mortgage payment, so I'm paying the bank. Or if I do a HELOC, I'm paying them 4%, well, today's rates, 4% on my money that I put into that house. So you don't own your house. And I think the quicker you get to the mindset of, look, I'm paying someone for this money, it's just a matter of, can I take this money and make better money? And once you get past that and over it and realize your equity is not really your equity, right? You're still going to pay for your equity. So, but just make wise decisions and use that to you become the bank and just make more money than the bank.
Love it, man. Love it. Well, I know this was kind of a little bit different of a podcast. David and I have lots of conversations, and we just felt that this could be, if this helps one person, I think it's a success. For those that already know all this stuff, what I would hope and ask for you to do is to share it with someone that might not know all this stuff. And if you're having conversations because you feel like you are the finance guru at your command and people are coming to you, share this podcast and tell them to go listen to a bunch of knuckleheads talk about all of our mistakes that we made in the past.
Knuckleheads wearing wigs.
I think this makes us smarter. What do you think?
I think you're probably very wrong in
I feel
that.
Smarter.
Do you?
Yeah.
That's good. As long as you feel smarter. Hey, all that matters is how you feel, Stu. If your emotions are good.
I can do this.
Your hair's not even moving, dude.
Oh.
It's so good. It's not even moving. This one goes a little bit crazy. Yeah, no, I'll tell you one other thing is everybody loves real estate, even if they're not doing real estate. So be that guy or gal in your command, your squadron, whatever, and just bring it up. Like, just start talking about because you could literally change somebody's life with the knowledge that you possess, especially the younger guys and gals, right? Especially the younger guys and gals that have years to be able to implement some of these strategies, and you could change their life, and you never know how that'll work out for them. So I love it. Thank you, Stu. This is good chat. We love talking about this stuff all the time. We run numbers by each other, and hey, nobody's immune to it. Stu hit me up with some deals in Colorado that he was considering and was like, "Hey dude, what do you think of this?" I'm like, "That's a terrible, why are you even,
Yeah.
You're the smart guy. Like, you're the smart guy." And or the numbers guy, not the smart guy, but the numbers guy. And like, I'm telling you, like, I would not do this deal. This is not a good deal. You're like, "Yeah, but it feels," I'm like, right.
Feels?
And there has been a number of times where I'm like, "Hey, look at these. Like, am I looking at this right?" And you're like, "No, that's terrible." Like, wow, no, absolutely not. And so nobody's immune, especially when you're looking at a house you're going to live in. So run it by a buddy. Give us a call.
Yeah, I was going to say, throw it towards us. And if you're having questions on it, hit us up. David and I I love running numbers. I'm kind of a nerd, and I love running spreadsheets, and I'll run it through bigger pockets, rental analysis, BRRRR analysis, flip analysis, or whatever. And happy to help. Both David and I.
Yeah, all that analysis talk, I fell asleep temporarily, so I don't know if you said anything good or not. But all joking aside, we will look at those for you and just at least have a conversation, give you some points to consider, good or bad. And it takes the emotion out of it, right? We have no emotion. If you go buy a house, I don't, I wish you the best and it's great. So we'll give you an unbiased, there's going to be a bias to it, but at least an unemotional analysis of your deal. All right, buddy. This was fun.
Right.
Thanks for, yeah.
High fives. Something else.
Make it a great day, my friend.
And go for your storehouse.
And make it a great day.
And go for your storehouse.
But be sure to make it a great day.
And share this and give me 5 stars and become my best friend and go get a mullet.
You sound desperate.
And
make it a great day.
Go for your storehouse. See ya.